launched this Spatial Business Initiative with Esri. We're very excited about it. Really the purpose is to start to create a community of folks, professionals, students that use GIS for business. It involves a number of activities, research, which I'll report on an initial study in a few minutes. It also involves writing a book for Esri Press on spatial business, doing case studies, launching new degree programs, all in the spirit of forwarding the field of location analytics and location intelligence in business. Now, last year, I had an opportunity to speak here, and I spoke about spatial transformers and how we all should consider ourselves spatial transformers. What we're doing with this initiative is expanding that to think about spatial transformation, not just at the personal level of what we can do, which I'll return to at the end of my talk, but what's going on in organizations, in businesses. What's the current status of GIS use for business, and what's the future? So the purpose of this study, which was completed last night at like 10 p.m., is to develop an in-depth understanding of business patterns of GIS location intelligence adoption. And there's really two patterns that we're interested in. One, what you heard Mike Johnson refer to this morning, is a notion of location value and location value chain. Where is location and location intelligence delivering value within a company? Secondly, we have a concept of spatial maturity. How over time does a company, does a business, does an organization start to lean into having an enterprise perspective on GIS in business that is necessary for sustained use? So that's really was the focus of the study, and I'd like to go through some of the top-level results. The study itself is available at our booth, and we'll be there to take questions. If you can't read all the statistics here, it's also available online. First, right out of the gate, we looked at 9 business functions and asked, of the 300 survey respondents, how many of these functions do you use GIS? And what we found was 86% of the companies use GIS in more than one function. So obviously silo busting is underway. The average was about 3.5 business functions that a company used GIS for. But you can see the range here went all the way up to 14% using over 7. So that's a deep embeddedness of GIS in businesses. Now, what are those 9 functions? The ones we focused on were research and development, operations, IT, sales, marketing, C-suite decision-making, procurement, and supply chain management. What you see in this chart are the percent of companies that had high, which is in the Redlands maroon, or medium, moderate, which is in the blue, use of GIS in those functions today. So just to treetop it for a moment, you see that high use of R&D is 30%, moderate, slightly less, high use of operations, 27%, high use of IT, 27, 23, 20, you can read those numbers. So about 25% of the companies are having high use of GIS today. That's pretty substantial. And you see slightly less in moderate use. So we're seeing already that there's been growth across these different functions and using GIS to inform decisions that these functions have to make. We did a deep dive in 3 of these. We looked at consumer-centric activities, and in looking at consumer-centric activities, the highest use was to analyze spatial patterns of customers. That makes sense, we heard about it today. Customized marketing strategies, followed by predicting future trends, and somewhat lagging, optimizing sales territory. That's a new ground to cover. Second area that we took a deep dive on was operational activities. GIS use is highest in space location decisions, followed by spatial field data collection, and so on. You heard about some of these, again, this morning, particularly in the real estate and asset management, and using GIS to help manage and predict and affect those changes. The third deep dive that we took was, what are the strategic objectives for which GIS in businesses are being used? And the top ranked one, which is a good thing, is to drive business growth with competitive advantage. That's the top strategic objective of using GIS in these businesses. That was followed by optimized business performance for cost-effective manner. And that was followed by execute executive risk and disaster management. These, as you heard this morning, by the way, are some of the key focal areas that Cindy, Mike, and John talked about this morning. And you can see the relative value of those to the companies that we surveyed. So when you add it all up, what's the span of use of GIS in the 300 companies we surveyed? On one end of the spectrum, about 1 in 5 have very limited use. At the other end of the spectrum, about 1 in 5 have very high use. And then in the middle, there's the 28% that are currently limited but poised for growth, and about 25% that are moderate and steady growth. So it's really this middle section that we see is progressing in the advanced use of GIS within the next several years. This brings me to the topic of spatial maturity. As they advance, the idea is the distribution of use of GIS in businesses will go from shape A to shape B. Shape A, a lot of people use it a little bit, few people use it a lot. Shape B, a lot of people use it a lot, and less use it a little. When we ask directly, what do you think your level of spatial maturity is, we had, somewhat consistent to our use data, 27% said they were novice, 39% said that they were in the middle, and 20% mature. So there's something, by the way, we can learn from those that are spatially mature in terms of what's driving their growth. But before I get to that, I want to return to those 9 business functions. We asked, how much do you think you'll use GIS in these 9 business functions in 3 years? And you'll see, I would point your attention to the maroon chart line because that's high use. 51% high use in R&D, 44% high use in operations, 41% high use in services, 38% high use in sales, et cetera. I had an occasion outside, Jack Dangerman came by, and he knows about the survey, and he said, so what about the survey? And I had about 15 seconds. I had to find my Zen moment, and I said, 30 to 50% of the companies say they'll have high use of GIS in the top 5 business functions. He went, yeah. so that's my takeaway. If you don't remember any of the statistic, that's an important one. Now, we asked, what drives this growth? What differentiates those with high spatial maturity from those that do not have high spatial maturity? This is a complicated slide, so I will try to describe it this way. We're particularly interested in 5 drivers, 5 facilitators. 1, the perceived value of insights from location intelligence. 2, a clear and coherent business strategy. 3, C-suite sponsorship and support. 4, best-in-class technology. 5, clear articulation of return on investment. Again, focus on the maroon slide, the maroon line. Those are the spatially mature organizations, and it cascades down in maturity from there. So what you see, you can't read it, so I'll just give it to you in a high level, is value of insight, 83% said that was a factor in their level of GIS use and success. 71% of spatially mature said having a clear and coherent strategy was an important factor. 61% said C-suite support and sponsorship was a factor. 76% said availability of best-in-class technology. And 72% said a clear and articulated ROI. So these items are factors not only that helped those become spatially mature, become mature, but also factors that can help other organizations become mature. So when we move ahead, what we see is a period of transformation with businesses expanding their use, where they're poised for additional use, that they're developing clear case studies and business cases, and some are starting to achieve higher mobility. So what does that mean for spatial transformers? For me and you and others, what actions can be taken? First, pursue multi-function growth. Second, focus on customers and operations. Third, have a value focus. Value in terms of value added, value relative to cost. Fourth, talk business strategy, and focus on how you can achieve business gain through GIS. Finally, secure top management support for what you're doing and pursue that by talking that business language. Those are the 5 actions we recommend, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it later outside. We have several more steps in terms of summarizing the report, doing more analysis, follow-on research, and so forth. Feel free to talk to either myself or the research team outside. Thank you for your support. Somehow I said it in 10 minutes. See ya.